Hello everybody, and welcome back to another video. In today's video, I'll be doing an updated prediction for the 2024 presidential election, and I will be doing this state by state. It's been roughly a month since I last did one of these, so it is the March 2024 edition of my 2024 election prediction. These videos tend to take pretty long, so I'm going to get right into it. I'm going to start by filling out the states that are safe for Democrats. Now, last video, I said that I was going to start doing margin or doing my ratings by probability instead of margin, and I got a surprising amount of pushback on that because people thought it would make me less accountable. In all honesty, I don't really care that much, but because the overwhelming majority of people who did comment on the matter seem to be in favor of me doing, these shadings and ratings based on margin instead of probability, even though I prefer to do it the other way. I don't really care that much. And in a way, I understand the notion of it making me more accountable. And so I will be doing it by margin. Although obviously by November, I'll be releasing a prediction that incorporates margins in every state so that I am as accountable as possible. And so these are the states that I'm going to be deeming as safe for both parties. That gives Biden 181 electoral votes. That gives Trump 113. And I don't think any of these are that disputable, obviously. There may be some minor grievances you have with them. I think Illinois, there's a good chance is under 15 for Biden, but seeing as that's not too important right now, I'm just going to keep it in the safe column. And then you could say the same thing for potentially Mississippi or Missouri or Montana or Kansas for Trump. But, we're just going to move on here. Now, the likely states for Biden, I think, are pretty self-explanatory. Colorado could definitely be safe. We're just going to put it in likely because he won it by, actually, we'll put it in safe at this point. He won it by 13 in 2020, and he will likely win it by more this time. It trended left by a good amount in 2022. And most importantly, this is a state where I think Trump has nowhere to gain. In other swing states or blue states, I could definitely see Trump, even if he loses them or does worse than 2020, I could see areas where he could improve and tangibly do better. Colorado doesn't have one of those areas. It's just all trending left, and the only areas that moved right in 2020 were rural areas and small towns with 600 people. In those areas, if they're not already maxed out for Republicans, they're just not big enough to compensate for the hundreds of thousands of votes they're losing in the metro areas. And it's not only Denver, it's Colorado Springs, it's Boulder, it's Aurora. It's every city in Colorado has trended left. And Colorado Springs in specific was once very conservative. It's now turning purple and will probably be blue in the near future. So Colorado, to me, gone for Trump. New Mexico is smaller, and I think Trump will actually do better there, needed in 2020. But I do think it's still likely for Biden. I think he'll win it if we're doing my margins by, the high single digits, 7, 8, maybe 9%. It depends on how he performs with Hispanic voters in the South. I think he'll do fine in the suburbs. Again, the problem for him is that he has done really poorly historically with Hispanic voters in rural areas. New Mexico has a good chunk of that demographic, and I would expect it to not be great for Biden. Nebraska, second suburban district, won it by 6 in 2020. Probably win it by a little more this time. Minnesota, I think, could be around a 5 to 6% margin. It will trend a little bit to the right, I think, potentially. I do expect Donald Trump to do a little better among the working class and rural voters than he did in 2020. Now, you might be wondering throughout this video, why is Trump going to do better with the working class and with rural voters in some states than in other states? And the answer to that, especially relative to 2020, is Trump in Minnesota in 2020 left a lot to be desired. I think he could have done a lot better among working class voters in this state just based on exit polls. We saw he didn't do really that well with white voters. He didn't really do that well in the Iron Range, which is a historically working class Democratic area. I think in 2024, he's going to lose in the suburbs, as you might expect. He might do a little better with working class voters. In Minnesota's rural areas, are historically or have historically been not too unfriendly to Democrats. I think in 2024, that's going to continue to shift towards Republicans. Virginia, kind of the opposite of Minnesota. I think Biden will maybe do a little better there in 2024. I think this might be an unpopular opinion because Republicans did well there in 2021. But broadly, I don't see any warning signs for Biden in Virginia. He won it by just over 10% in 2020, and it's only grown in the areas that are growing are Democratic areas. I think even if you're not convinced he'll do well with independents, a lot of people have moved into Northern Virginia since 2020, and more importantly, Virginia did in 2022 vote for Democrats, even though the turnout was very bad for Democrats in a lot of areas. I think Biden will be just fine here. New Hampshire is the last state, as well as Maine. I'm going to give him two, northern New England states, educated, historically pretty liberal, and I would expect Biden does better here than he did in 2020. Now, will it be by a lot? Probably not. I think he only will do a point or so better. But these are areas that I think Trump is going to really have a hard time getting Republican turnout in. And New Hampshire was not that great of a showing for Trump in the primary. Haley got, I think, 43% of the vote there. And obviously, there's some other factors there. I still think Trump's going to have a lot of trouble turning out, his moderate voters in New Hampshire that came out for him last time. Not going to come out for him this time. Now, to go over to our likely Republican states, we'll be starting in Alaska. Donald Trump won the state by, I think, 10% in 2020. I think he'll win it by less this time, but it will certainly not be very close. I think he will win Iowa and Ohio by more than he won them in 2020. These are right-trending states. They are not as educated as the nation as a whole. And most importantly, they have areas where Trump can grow. In rural Iowa in 2020, Trump did very well. He can do better than he did in 2020. Republicans won the governor's race there by 20 points in 2022. And I don't think Trump will win Iowa by 20, but I think he'll win it probably by 10 or 11. It's a very rural state. It's a state where Democrats, although they have not won, actually they did win a state race in 2022. They won the auditor race by a couple thousand votes, which was interesting, but certainly not very significant. Democrats haven't really been competitive in Iowa I would say, since 2012. This is a state where Democrats, they haven't been competitive there in 12 years. They're still doing better than they should be, just based on demographics. Democrats have no business doing it as well as they do in Iowa, considering how rural and white it is. And I would argue that Trump will do better there in 2024 than he did in 2022. Ohio will be a less severe swing. I actually think Ohio could be an underrated candidate to swing towards Biden by the slimmest of margins, so I'm a lot less confident in it than I am in Iowa. But regardless, Mahoning Valley, gone for Democrats. A lot of areas around Toledo and parts of Cleveland where Democrats, I think, are going to struggle. I also think Biden might just have a turnout problem here. Sherrod Brown running a competitive Senate campaign there will help Democrats with turnout, but a lot of it's going to come down to how voters perceive Joe Biden. And if there's a lack of enthusiasm surrounding Biden with college voters, that could hurt Biden in Ohio, because there are a good amount of universities in Ohio, and they do contribute to the Democratic coalition there. And I think Biden could fall there. And then my last few states for the likely column for the GOP, in the South, Florida and South Carolina, and then up north, Maine 2nd District. Just to get this out of the way, Trump won it by, I think, 7% in 2020. It's right he could win it by more. And then more importantly, I would say Florida is going to vote for Trump by 5 or 6, maybe 7 points. It depends on how turnout looks. But Democrats have just had putrid turnout there for the past few cycles. In 2020, it wasn't where they needed it to be, and in 2022, they had an unmitigated disaster. Obviously, the turnout will be better for Democrats because it's a presidential year, so there's a floor, realistically. But at the same time, party registration data we have about how people in Miami-Dade County are feeling about Biden, very, very discouraging for Democrats. Democrats should not invest a dime in Florida. This state is gone for them, and I think Biden will lose it by upwards of 6%, which is double what he lost to Biden, almost double what he lost to Biden in 2020. So the rest of these states are to some degree competitive. This hasn't changed, but I'm going to introduce a new state to the lean Democratic column, which is going to be Arizona. Now, Arizona is going to certainly be interesting because I made a video about it, and I said that Biden's likely to win here. And a lot of people, some people agreed, some people didn't agree, but most of it's Maricopa County. It's where 62% of the state's electorate lives. It's going to make up a similar amount, maybe more, but 63% of the electorate in 2024, and it trended 5% to the left in 2020. The swing between its 2022 presidential margin and 2022 Senate race margin was D+5 as well, so it's trended towards Democrats by a good amount in the past 2 cycles, and I would expect that to continue. Now, could Trump do better in the other parts of Arizona? Maybe. Will it matter? Not if Maricopa swings even 2 or 3 points to the left. And so I would say Arizona. Trump's got a chance there. It's a swing state for a reason. Biden, to me, just based on the math that I've done, is favored there. Now, that's the state I'm most confident about for Biden. But for Trump, there are a few. For starters, Texas, I'm putting in the lean column, and that's not because I think it's lean by probability. By probability, you could put it in likely, and I might just do that just so that no one takes a screenshot at the end of the video and says that I think Texas is competitive. But I do want to talk about it in some detail here. Obviously, Texas is going to be a swing state at some point. When that day will come, we don't know for sure. But we know 2024 is, or November 2024 is not that time. Democrats would like to be competitive in Texas. They haven't been yet. They came close in 2018, and since then they haven't really come close at all, even though in 2020 a lot of people actually did pick Biden to win Texas. Now, Texas, in theory, Democrats have a path to victory there via juicing turnout and doing very, very well in the metro areas such as Dallas, Houston, San Antonio, and Austin. And they're left trending, especially Austin, I think is really good for Democrats. Dallas, Fort Worth is very big. It's a bit less liberal or progressive than Austin, but it's big and it does net votes for Democrats. But the problem for Democrats in Texas is that they don't get the turnout they need out of Houston, which is the biggest city in the state. Houston's a very big city. It's, I believe, in the top 5 in the country. And Democrats just don't get the turnout they need out of the city of Houston. If Houston voted at the same rate that other big cities did for Democrats, Texas would be a lot more competitive. The problem is that Democrats haven't been able to get turned out of Houston, and I think Biden, especially considering how unpopular he is with the Democratic base, again, the majority of Democrats didn't even want him to run again. I think given that, hard to expect a turnout sufficient for Democrats to win Texas. Now, this is a path mathematically, but it, again, relies on turnout, and my argument is that I don't believe Biden can get that turnout. So, for that reason, I'm going to keep Texas in the lean likely GOP column, likely just to, not upset people, but if we're doing in terms of margin, I could see it falling under 5, but it will not go further than a 4-point Trump victory. And then my other states I'm confident that Trump's going to win at this point, I think, is North Carolina. North Carolina, to me, is a bit of fool's gold for Joe Biden, and I know most people don't like that opinion because the consensus is that, people feel comfortable when they're on offense. And right now, the map has shifted towards Trump, and a lot of Democrats are compensating for that by saying, well, Biden can win North Carolina. And he can. It's not dark red, but the problem for him is that if he wins North Carolina, he's already won the election, and by that I mean he's already won the Rust Belt, he's already won Nevada, or he's already won Georgia, and most likely Nevada. And just based on how likely he is to win those states, it doesn't make sense to spend money in North Carolina when you could spend money in Pennsylvania, Michigan, or Georgia. And so that's why I would argue that Biden, definitely should invest there, but at the same time, he should know that this is a reach state for him. And I genuinely do think that the campaign doesn't know that. The campaign has, at this point, made it seem as though they believe this is a toss-up and that they have a 50-50 shot there. And I think that's a mistake. And that could affect them in other states. Because if they're spending money in North Carolina that could otherwise be going to Michigan or Pennsylvania, and Trump wins those states by, say he wins Michigan by the same amount he won it by in 2016, which is 10,000 votes, that could have a pretty serious impact on the election. Now, to go back to North Carolina, I think, to be perfectly clear, that Biden will do well enough in the suburbs. I think his problem is just turnout. And again, turnout was the problem for Democrats in 2022 because Sherry Beasley she held her own in the suburbs, and she actually performed just fine among exurban Republican voters, or exurban Republican areas. The problem that she had was that the turnout from the cities of Charlotte, Raleigh, Durham, and Greensboro, as well as Winston-Salem, those big cities that are across the state of North Carolina, were not good enough for her. The turnout there was not what Democrats would have needed to win, even though Sherry Beasley did fine in the suburbs. And so Biden can do fine in the suburbs, and I think he's going to lose by more than he lost by in 2020 here, just because I think that the turnout in those cities will be terrible. I also think, North Carolina, big, I guess, big university state, UNC, Duke, UNC Wilmington, good UNC system there. There's also, I think a significant amount of post-grad students in North Carolina, if I'm not wrong. Problems for Biden because we know young voters, obviously the polls show him losing young voters outright. That's not going to happen, but, that is a problem that exists for Biden. And so, to me, North Carolina, those two factors, turnout in the urban areas as well as turnout and enthusiasm among college voters. In a state is smart, in a state where Democrats, if they do win, it's always very close. Those two things make it seem to me as though it's not going to be a Biden victory in North Carolina. That could change. It's definitely still in play. For now, I think it's pretty clear that Trump is the favorite here. Now, these final 5 states, I think, are all going to be within 2%. I think Biden, the most confident one for him is Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania, just to start out here and just to go through this, Trump mathematically can get within 1%. I don't think he can get within 0%. If we're being realistic, I think that there's a very small range of outcomes here. If you made me draw it out for you, I would say that at best for Biden, he wins by 2.5. At worst, he wins it by, or he loses it by 0.4, 0.3. This state does not give Republicans a lot of opportunities. They haven't won a statewide race, a federal statewide race here since 2016 when Trump and Toomey won, and in 2022 they got crushed. The problem for Republicans is that the Philadelphia suburbs are a big part of the state's electorate. That metro area is huge comparatively. If you compare it to a state like North Carolina, the electorate of the Charlotte metro area is a lot smaller than the electorate of the Philadelphia metro area relative to the rest of the state. So Philadelphia has a much bigger sway on Pennsylvania than a lot of people think. And Biden might not do that great in the city of Philadelphia. I think he'll do really well in the suburbs. I think he'll do better than he did in 2020 in the outskirts of Philadelphia. And that's going to matter a lot, especially when you remember that Pittsburgh, Allegheny County is also trending left. John Fetterman won it by, I think, like 10% or 8% more than Joe Biden won it by in 2022. So those two areas, the suburbs of Pittsburgh and the suburbs of Philadelphia, that's enough to lift Biden over the edge. Now, the way that Biden loses Pennsylvania is if turnout in Pittsburgh and Philadelphia falls, and if the suburbs, for whatever reason, don't move enough towards Biden to compensate for that. But that also doesn't take into account the fact that Republicans in the central area of the state, kind of in this, Pittsburgh's over here, Philly's over here, in this, central area, the Republicans have some problems there because they're going to do just fine in the rural areas, but I'm not entirely convinced that Trump's going to do enough in the southern part of the state, where Harrisburg is, those counties that moved towards Biden by a good amount in 2020 and moved towards Fetterman in 2022. I'm not convinced that those counties are safe for Republicans either, or that those, the southern portion of the state, or I should say south central portion of the state, Dauphin County, Cumberland County, those areas, I'm not convinced that those areas aren't going to move away from Trump. I think that, the way they trended left in recent years makes me more inclined to think that that's an underrated problem area for Republicans. And so relative, Harrisburg isn't anywhere near as big as Pittsburgh or Philadelphia, but it is important for Republicans in the sense that they've been used to doing okay there, and I think that that's an area where they could lose ground. So again, that's convoluted. Pennsylvania is a bigger electorate than people think. It's a lot more diverse than people think. But my point is this. There are 8 ways I can draw a Biden victory in Pennsylvania. There's only 1 or 2 ways I can draw a Trump victory in Pennsylvania, and for that reason, I am inclined to say Biden is favored there, even if it's only by a little bit, or percentage-wise, it's not that impressive. Now, I'm going to give Nevada to Trump here, just going in order of how confident I feel in these takes. I think Trump will win Nevada just solely because he will do, or because Biden will not do that well in Las Vegas. I think the turnout there isn't going to be what it needs to be. I also think that the suburbs of Las Vegas are weird, because in 2020, in the South, Phoenix suburbs swung towards Biden. Los Angeles suburbs swung towards Biden. Denver suburbs swung towards Biden. Not really southern, but, southwest, this area. Austin zoomed towards Biden. Dallas zoomed towards Biden. Even Jacksonville in Florida zoomed towards Joe Biden. Guess what area didn't? It's Las Vegas. Las Vegas' suburbs were stagnant. I think they moved a point towards Biden, but not enough. And he won Nevada by less than Hillary Clinton did in a year that was over 2% more favorable to Democrats in 2020 compared to 2016. I think Biden will lose Nevada this year by under a point. I think it'll come down to 15,000, 20,000 votes. But it will certainly be a state that I think Trump will be favored in. The polls in Nevada are bad for Biden. It's a state with all his problems. Hispanic voters he's polled poorly with. Hispanic voters are a significant chunk of the electorate in this state. Urban working class voters in Las Vegas, massive problem for Biden. And then the young voters. Nevada's a young, growing state, and Democrats haven't necessarily proven themselves to be effective with that demographic in 2024. I think Biden, as of right now, is a underdog in Nevada. Not clear by how much, but he is, to me, an underdog. And I don't really think you can make an argument that he's favored there right now. Obviously, it's a close state. I'm not saying it's safe for Trump, but to me, it's kind of like it's like the reverse Pennsylvania. For every argument that you can make for Biden being favored in Nevada, there's 6 I can make for Trump being favored. And so that leaves Wisconsin, Michigan, and Georgia. And I would say I think that if the election were held tomorrow, or at least this week, I think Trump would win Georgia. I know a lot of people are really bullish on him there. I'm cautious because Republicans haven't actually won anything federally in Georgia since 2018, or since 2016, actually, although in 2018 they would have likely had there been a Senate race. In 2020, 2021, and 2022, Democrats won the presidency and 3 Senate races there, Warnock twice and Ossoff once. And, I understand that Republicans came close in all 3 elections, but they still lost them. And in 2024, there are not going to be a lot of people who voted for Raphael Warnock who are going to vote for Joe Biden or for Donald Trump. Now, the reason I think that if the election were held right now, that Trump would win Georgia, is that the turnout machine for Democrats in Georgia is really important. Unlike in neighboring North Carolina or Florida, Democrats in Georgia have broadly been good at getting the turnout they need to win these elections, especially in these Senate runoff elections where they've become quite skilled at crafting good electorates. And I would say that as of right now, I'm not sure if they'd get the turnout necessary. I think Biden would do fine in the suburbs. I don't think he'd do well enough in the city of Atlanta and with college voters. Again, Georgia, a lot of universities in Georgia too. Georgia Tech, just UGA, Emory, which is in Atlanta. There's more that I'm forgetting. Even Georgia State, I think, is a reasonably sized university. There's more you can think of. Big college state, a lot of young people in Georgia. Problem area for Biden. I think right now he'd lose it, but that definitely could change before Election Day. So that leaves these 2 states. I think Biden will win Michigan, and that's going to give him the 271 electoral votes needed. I think Trump would narrowly win Wisconsin as of right now. And I don't have anything, like this state is so close that I'd like to leave it blank. But no, that's not fun. No one likes when I do that. So I'm going to put it in the Trump column. I think Trump would win Wisconsin just because I'm assuming that Biden's going to do a little worse with the working class vote than people think. And that would, line up with him narrowly losing Wisconsin. He can easily make it up by doing well in the WOW counties and the suburbs of Madison, which is possible. That's why it's a toss-up. But gut, as of right now, 51% chance Trump wins it, but I'm not confident in that at all. If you go in the comments and are like, what is wrong with you? Biden's going to win Wisconsin. I'm going to ask you by how much. You're going to say, by 0.7%. And I'm going to be like, okay, so it's a toss-up. And so Wisconsin, very close. Michigan, I think, is a bit less close. It's still going to be within, I think, 2%. But I'm a little more confident in Biden there than I am in Trump in Wisconsin because Michigan, Trump lost Michigan by 150,000 votes in 2020. People forget that. People act like it's like this super close red state. But Michigan was only a point and a half to the right of the country in 2020. It swung left relative to the country in 2020. Wisconsin, neighboring, did not do that. And more importantly, I think that a lot of people really seem to think Biden's going to lose Michigan because of the Arab vote, because of the conflict in Israel and Palestine and the perceived handling of, how Biden is perceived to have handled it thus far. I obviously will not be getting into that, but I will just weigh in on the electoral implications of it. Biden obviously might not do very well with Arab voters in Dearborn, but there are 2 things that I want to say. First, Arab voters or voters who identify as having Arabic descent or just being Arab in Michigan, it's a significant electorate relative to the rest of the country, but it's still under 2% of the state's population. So that Biden could do 25% worse with Arabic voter, or I guess Arab voters in Michigan, and he would do less than 0.5% worse statewide. Secondly, the primary was supposed to be this huge, showing in favor of, voting uncommitted. Essentially, is voting for a ceasefire now in Palestine / Israel, and that the number of people that voted uncommitted in the primary was not as much as what was expected. So Biden held his own there. And those 2 things make me think that the hype around Trump winning Michigan because of the Arab vote, dissenting or just terrible turnout for Biden in Michigan, I would argue is exaggerated. Trump can definitely win Michigan. I wouldn't be shocked if he did, but Biden won by 150,000 votes in 2020. I think he'll win it by less this time, but I don't see how Trump can gain all the way back. Maybe he'll gain halfway back. Not sure if he can gain all the way back. So in case you hadn't noticed by now, this is a super close election. Biden wins by 4 electoral votes. I really hope this doesn't happen. Either way, just because this would be a very, very, very divisive result. And I'm sure just based on how 2020 we had a lot of divisiveness, and that electoral college was not as close as this one was. So that is my prediction as of right now. If the election happened this week, what I think would happen. Let me know what you think in the comments. Let me know what states you change, and let me know what videos you want to see next, because I'm obviously always looking for video suggestions. So, also most importantly, before I forget, I wrote this to myself on a piece of paper next to my computer that I forgot about until now. YAPMS.com, which I have been loyally using for 4 years now, and actually promoting on this channel in a way. I noticed that under options, if you put in, you can put in a chart logo. A lot of great channels here, but my channel's not one of them. And, that to me is a little mean, because I've been a pretty loyal user of YIPMS.com for 4 years. And I also, I have 7,000 subscribers now, I think more than that. So I would argue that, put me on the debate stage, put me in there. I am polling high enough to meet that criteria. But regardless, thank you so much for watching. Again, subscribe if you haven't already. Leave a like, and again, tell me what you want to see next, and I'll see you all in the next one.